Hello, listeners. Welcome to yet another episode of the Courage Talks. Special guest today is Dilip. Dilip is a seasoned entrepreneur, a sub-3 marathoner, a podcast host, but most important, he's an extremely down-to-earth and kind gentleman. Welcome, Dilip.
Looking forward to this conversation.
Great. So, Dilip, Courage Talks is all about courage. The story is my book, which is my dad's biography, Against All Odds. And this is a small initiative in that direction. What does courage mean to you?
The meaning of courage has evolved for me. I just turned 40, so I would say probably every decade it has evolved. When I was growing up, I didn't know what the definition is. Courage was parents will throw a challenge to say, hey, do this. Are you very diluted? But as I started growing up, the definition in my 20s, in my 30s, and now when I'm in my 40s, the definition has evolved. I think right now where I stand, courage for me is essentially doing something what you really want to do without thinking about the outside world. It's very the intrinsic without thinking a lot of other factors. And if you can build that muscle and just go out and do it without even thinking about the outcome, that would mean courage for me.
Wonderful. Any role models for courage?
Again, because the definition has evolved for me growing up, my wife, my son, the colleagues I work with, I think there is an example and role model of courage everywhere. So hard to pinpoint one particular person. In the moments when I was really down and under, there were a lot of people who came and ceded their courage to me. So I think many.
Wonderful. Great, great. So we know you as you are today, Dilip, a fairly successful person, but we don't know about your childhood. So why don't you just take us down memory lane? What was childhood or growing up like? Where did you grow up? A bit about your parents as well.
Sure. Now, before that, I mean, you've been very kind with your words to say that I'm successful. I think it's just a constant journey, but I just wanted to say, I mean, my version of intro, when people ask me to give my intro, for me, the intro is that for the longest part of my career, I was an entrepreneur doing a lot of mistakes and figuring out how to do a business. Now I'm cheering other entrepreneurs and learning from their mistakes as they do and still figuring it out how to do a business. So in that context, I think the intent and the objective still remain. The narratives, what you gain, and the playbooks, what you create over the period of time keeps compounding. So given that context, childhood was very normal, very typical middle class family. I won't say there was a lot of struggle.
Where did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Delhi, yeah, South Delhi precisely. So all my education up till my graduation happened in Delhi. Like I said, middle class family. Mom went for a government, and whatever I wanted, my sibling wanted, my brother wanted, we were getting it. It was not really as that struggle. But I think post that, when I made my decision to pursue entrepreneurship, which is few years after my college, that's when I started realizing what it takes to build something more upstream when you don't have the support system. So the background has been, I don't want to dramatize it to say that there is a lot of ups and downs. It's just been what a typical 80s middle class family will go through.
Okay, that's great. We all have our growing up moments, right? There are certain instances when reality strikes. We realize that life is not a bed of roses, it has its own challenges. And we tend to remember that particular incident or that particular day for a very long time. Would you be able to trace back memory and tell me which was that kind of turnaround moment where you realized that you need to do a lot more in life than what you had anticipated?
Yeah, interesting you ask. This is one of the most common incidents I say because now it's also related to what I do. During my first startup, this is year 2009, 2015, that's what my first startup was. In India, in the corporate culture, you have this system where you, at the end of the year, you have to give your medical bills for
Yeah.
reimbursement. It's just about, I think, 15, 20,000 rupees. And, my accounts person came up and told me I need to submit those bills. I said, I'll come back the next day. And I went home. I started reconciling all my medical bills. And I mean, I was an entrepreneur, so obviously I was not earning that much. I was probably taking 35,000 rupees of salary per month. But my wanted almost more than 60% of my annual income.
Oh man.
So the painful part was that when I started accounting, the guy wanted 15,000, and you could imagine that I had more than lakh and a half of medical bills. And when I started figuring it out, the taxonomy of the medical bills, it turns out that there was no particular organ of my body which I haven't shown to a doctor for a consultation. Wow. So from every, I possibly have visited every department of a hospital, across that annual year. From moments for me to step back, pause, and just try to
And these
ask
are different
myself.
doctors. Otherwise, I would have said you were physically attracted.
No, indeed, these are different doctors in different hospitals, right?
Okay.
Different, but it's almost all the departments you would think about in a
Yeah.
hospital. Nothing from a surgical point of view, but from an OPD, from a diagnostics point of view, I've gone through everyone. And you could imagine an OPD consultation would cost you what? Maybe 500 to 1,000 bucks, depending on the hospital, right? So
Mm.
I've done probably all scans what are available, what the doctors typically recommend. But that was that moment for me to step back and to ask myself, what is it all worth for, right? I mean, you can go build a unicorn because I was an entrepreneur. That was the word which was peddled on me. You
Yeah.
can build valuation, you can build whatnot. But at the end of the day, when you come back, you can't get a very peaceful sleep. You are stressed, you're
Yeah.
anxious. It's just not worth. Until that moment, I just didn't even know what stress means or what anxiety means. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. That moment was that pivotal, almost like mid part of my biological age. It was my early 30s when I realized I have to slow down.
Mm.
That fast pace is just not adding up, right? There's no printed or even guaranteed outcome, even if I try to run that fast. Irony is that as a sport, I am trying to run, but from a life cadence point, that was the pivotal point which kind of changed almost the entire trajectory of my life thereon in terms of what I ended up doing.
And you never went to a doctor ever again.
No, I mean, it would be it would be wrong to say I haven't gone.
Who's the fairy tale would have ended that way?
Yeah, no, I still go, but obviously the frequency is much, much less.
Yeah.
It's still much controlled, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And you're much more aware about what's going on, right? So you're not going to doctor with a quizzical situation in mind as well.
of course.
Since you mentioned your idols are your parents, your wife, your son. If there was one incident or one story which you wanted to narrate of any of these people, what would it be?
No, clearly it would be my wife. My wife is the longest friend I've had, the
Okay.
longest partner I've had. She's also been a co-founder, and I say this because it takes a lot of courage to.
You're the co-founder
Uh,
before wife or after becoming wife?
I know she was before. I mean, we go long back.
You all prospered during the
Yeah,
startup.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to make a decision to spend your lifetime with
Of
someone where
course.
there's so much of uncertainty. Like she knew back then, where the very first moment that maybe this is not the guy who will do a 9 to 6 job. So there's so much of uncertainty, and why would someone want to invite that the risk in their life? I mean, I can do it, but why would she is far more courageous than me to decide to spend time with me and also to constantly cheer and support me. And in
Mhm.
that sense, I've been super lucky to have a partner like her. So I think everything she has done so far for me, the family, has been super courageous. So a lot of gratitude to her for that.
Wow, wow, that's interesting. Any story or any incident about your wife that you would like to narrate?
Yeah, the reason I say courageous is also because not just from an emotional, mental point of view, she's also very courageous in all the other facets. So I remember, I don't want to take a lot of time because this might just go off it, but since you asked it, she and me had went to a mountain, and we went. There's a sport called ice sledging,
Okay.
where there's a mountain and you go down. So it
Yeah.
just sledges with the mountains. We were there in a mountain, and we clearly knew that day we were not just that day we were not meant to do that, in the sense we were not prepared, forget mentally, physically. As we going up, we could see that we were not equipped with the right apparels and right shoes, none.
Mhm.
We were a tourist, and we thought, okay, we started the sledge. We were very uninformed, we were not trained. The guide just told us, hey, look, this is the sledge, this is what two people have to sit. The person on the front will have to steer, and the person on the back should be maneuvering. So we
Yeah.
said, okay, this is cool. This is a classic touristy thing. So let's do this. So we just did it. And so you could imagine we're just coming off the mountain, right? So it's
Yeah.
almost like going like a gravity. Like 10 seconds in, after we started, the sledge toppled. And I got up, and instantly my wife said, my shoulder is broken. And it's just the middle of the mountain. So you can't go down. You can't either go up now.
Yeah.
So you have to call up a SOS or a helicopter to come and rescue you.
Yeah.
So we did all of that. We had someone come and rescue us, and all that while she was having a smile because we were on a vacation. She clearly knew that she has broken some part of her shoulder, but she didn't know what intensity it was.
Yeah.
And I was freaked out, because this is an area. I mean, we were in a country where English was not a common language. So I
Yeah.
was freaked out. How do we go and talk to the doctor? All the
Yeah.
medical procedure, right? But she was keeping her calm all that while. She had a smile in her face. When we walked into the doctor, we did the scans, and they said that, the shoulder elbow is broken, so you literally have to do a surgery right now in couple
Okay.
of hours. And that is just one moment which just reminds me every time. It's been almost 4 5 years now, but it just
Yeah.
reminds me that if you have that mental tenacity and that jacket which you can always
Yeah.
wear, any sort
Yeah.
of physical pain can be shadowed on that, right? So
No doubt about it.
but that's something which I remember. It's a combination of both physical and mental courage on a part.
Yeah. No, thanks for narrating the story. I don't think this episode would have been complete if you had not shared that.
By the way, there are some pictures on one of the blogs which I wrote where she's on the hospital bed smiling with her broken elbow.
I'll probably tag that along with the
Yeah,
podcast. It's a must
sure.
have there. You mentioned about mental tenacity, right? And courage, unlike what is typically perceived, there's a lot more mental courage needed in today's life than physical courage, right? And you've been through a lot of trying circumstances, whether it's your entrepreneurship or the life that you're living, right? Any particular moment or incident that you would like to narrate where you were kind of really stressed and you held on to your own mental fortitude and brave through the situation?
Yeah, not just one moment. I think it would be unfair to the entrepreneurship journey because every 29th of the month I'm stressed because I have to pay the salaries. And I used to joke around with my friends who are not entrepreneurs to say that you get a message every month that the money is crediting to your account. I get a message to the month saying that the money is debiting from your account. Right? So I think every month the stress would be there that, will you be able to pay salaries because there are people's livelihood which is dependent on you. Every month there would be stress that whatever you're building will customers buy it. Every investor meeting was extremely stressful because you don't know what the outcome is and you're constantly going and telling your story. Right. So I think, like I said, I mean, there's so many, so it's hard to pinpoint on one stressful moment. But I think entrepreneurship, this is said enough, out there that it's just like, sleeping on a bed of stress and anxiety, right? Stress and anxiety, unfortunately, partner if
Yeah.
you're not married, right? So you have to sleep with it and maybe drink a coffee, which could be a courageous for you. So,
Wow.
so coffee is equivalent to your courage and you sleep with your stress and anxiety. So I think that's something what every entrepreneur goes through. I'm sure you have gone through and
Yeah.
you just have to live through it.
That's true. That's true. No, very well said. And the other thing which we have in common is our love for running, right? And when you sign up for a run, you really don't know what you're signing up for till the shoes hit the road. I would not say the rubber hits the road, right? And then you encounter situations where you are totally unprepared, or things turn out to be a lot more tougher. Anything from your running journey which you'd like to share? Which was your toughest run, or which is the run which has stayed with you despite you may have done many more runs after that?
Yeah, so I think every time I decide to start training for a race, that first run is the most hardest run because now you have set an intrinsic goal. Most of the runners you would resonate with it is that they will set a certain timing goal that look, I want to finish a race at certain. So you carry and you step out from your home the first time to say that okay, that's my goal, and I start training. So the very first day when you have that on your mind constantly, that that's the goal which you want to pursue and achieve, and the first run is so far away from it, you're panting, you're trying to catch up on your breath, it's paining, and you're constantly, the thing in your head is that why the heck have you signed this up for? I mean, how on the earth are you going to do this? Right? And that happens to me every year, right? I mean, why would you do that, right? And interestingly, that's the same story or the narrative which plays when you are shows up on the race day or the start line.
Yeah.
Every 5 kilometers, or depending on how that distance you play around, you have these moments of existential questions that why are you doing this, why would you want your body to go through? So I think those moments are always, I've just, as we speak, I've just resumed my running for the last few months. I took a break because I wanted to spend some time building some other skills. And I was just realizing today that, the 2 minute pace which I had today just to kind of test my anaerobic level was incidentally my marathon pace to a year back. And I was out of breath and I was trying to think through that how on the earth did I do a marathon at that distance, at that pace effort, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of everything we do in life, which has pain, right? I mean, you have to go through it. So I mean, you and me would draw a lot. Life, business, entrepreneurship, everything what we do has that variable of endurance. It
Yeah.
just teaches you to be focusing on the short term while you are trying to build for the long term and just kind of pick on one milestone at a time. So in that context, I think running has possibly been my most valuable college or school, I could say, for life.
Any particular injuries that you had during running, and if you remember the same?
Oh, tons of them. I don't
This
know
is
of any. I don't know of any runner who would ever say that they haven't had any injury. It could either mean that you haven't run enough, or
yeah.
probably you're just walking. But yeah, I've had all types of injuries. There have been few injuries which have nagged me for a long while, my calf pain and calf and all. But else, any the typical injuries, your ITP, the runner's knee, I've had all. Like I said, it's again parallel of life. Like when you start, you just look running as a one-sided perspective, but there's so much of things around that, right? I mean, you have to do strengthening, conditioning, you have to do recover, you have to do
Yeah.
nutrition. You become more learned, you try to address those the things what will pull you down. So in that context, if there is a Wikipedia of injuries, I've had all of them.
What's your FMPB?
Oh, the last one which I did was 2 hour 55 minutes.
And where and when was this?
This is Ahmedabad Marathon. I think this is November of 2022.
Okay. And which is the next one?
That's a good question. I've been trying to, like I said, because I have gotten back to running. With all honesty, every morning I have to do a self-talk and motivation talk to myself that I have to go out and run now.
Yeah.
So I have made up my mind because now the goal is to build consistency. I usually don't race a lot. I typically do 1 or 2 races and 1 half marathon. So that way I'm very selective, but I typically train throughout the year so that I can, stay fit and in shape. So I'm hoping if I can maintain the consistency, I'll possibly choose something end of this year or early next year.
Wonderful. And, your journey as a podcast host has been quite phenomenal, of course. That's how I really realized the wealth of and depth of knowledge that you have, because to get a podcast host and be convincing in terms of the range of questions that you have required a lot of effort, right? Who's been your favorite podcast guest so far? If you were supposed to name maybe 1 or 2 of them.
That's a good question. I don't know if I name one of them, others would like it or not. But I think
We're not running an opinion poll here, don't worry. We won't give them a chance to share their feedback.
No, I think first of all, again, gratitude to everyone for accepting to come on the podcast. Like I said, they have no reason, but all of them have been brilliant in every sense. I think one of the things which is closest to me is the one which I did with Seema, Nitin's wife, the founder of Zerodha, because I've known Seema for a while now, and I think the constant exchange of messages for us always was that why should we do this? There's so many people with that background. She would always say that, look, what is new in me? I haven't told her this, but I was the least prepared for this or that podcast, because here is someone who has gone through so much of physical pain, and making the person jog back those painful experiences extremely hard, and to make them comfortable to have honest and making them being vulnerable is super hard. So in my head, I didn't know what to ask her. I couldn't prepare for her because she's not there in public, right? There's not a lot you can research about her. So the only thing which I knew is personally which I know about her.
Yeah.
So that was something which, and it again, because it's so apt, we are talking about courage. I think that for me was extremely courageous for her to come up, because here is someone who has a lot to lose because she's on, because of all the time.
Yeah.
So just to come in front of the camera in a public media and be vulnerable and open about what's in your mind, that takes a lot of courage. So that was it was also a blessing in disguise, because I was the least prepared. So it ended up more like, 2 people who knew each other having just a conversation, and a camera was kept there.
Yeah.
So that's a podcast which is,
I think there was overflow of courage, I would say. On the one hand, Seema talking about what she had gone through and obviously required a lot of courage. And Dilip, because he was grossly underprepared, which is very unlike him, because all your podcasts, you have done tons of data and research before you get the guest on board, right?
Yeah, interestingly, I have to, it's some impression people have probably who have followed the podcast, that I am extremely prepared. Genuine honesty is that I am prepared to a limit, which gives me the confidence to sit in front of the guest. But it's
Yeah.
mostly my curiosity. As you said in the beginning, right? I mean, the questions are from the lens of my genuine curiosity to know which I want to know.
Yeah.
And then I get a lot of good feedback from you and others who would say that, this is unique and different. So, think of having a podcast, like I said, I have no incentive to be a podcaster. It is just a side passion project which allows me to have conversations with interesting people and learn from them. So it's just my curiosity.
So let me throw your favorite question to you. So what was your morning routine today, Dilip?
So today, incidentally, I did a run. So I ran for 12 kilometers.
How much time it took you for the 12K?
Maybe around an hour.
So it was a relatively slow paced run, I would say. So for me, the source of inspiration, not just courage, but purely wisdom, is books, right? Any few books which you would recommend being a source of inspiration or something which has stayed with you?
I always keep going back, not just one but two. Is the almanac of Naval Ravikant and an almanac of Charlie Munger. I mean, I find them it's so relatable in everything what we do. I mean, there's so much of wisdom and learning in just like one liners. This
Yeah.
one line could mean so much the way you look through. So, I mean, it might not qualify as a classic book what one would look through because these are not authors as such, but someone else has written about them. But
Yeah.
those are just two books which I probably end up reading at least 4 to 5 times a year. I just keep going back and reading back and forth. So those books have given me a lot of meaning.
Any colleagues or anyone that you have worked with who has inspired you in their little way outside the family?
If I say the name, it might sound like I'm being very biased, but maybe my current boss, Nitin. So he had no reason to invest in me when I was starting up. I just wrote a cold email to him and he decided to invest in me. When I decided to shut the company, he asked me to come and help him run the fund. He had no reason to do that either because I'm
Yeah.
not a typical an MBA or someone who I mean I never wanted to pursue the investment world or any of that sort. So I think
Yeah. Yeah.
again it takes a lot of courage on his part to do that. And I don't know why he did that or he's continuing to do that. So I think he inspires me a lot. I mean, because I spend so much of time with him every day, just a middle class guy. Today he's not middle class, but growing up I just to have those values and he just very relatable guy. He inspires me.
Great. Great. So the last question, I flip the mic around. What's the question you have for me?
Wow, yeah. So this is also one of my favorite questions which I ask my guests. So maybe I should ask you also.
Sure.
So Hetal, if you get a chance to write what you want on a billboard, the billboard is probably in one of the busiest part of the city, and you can end whatever you want. What would you write there?
Very interesting question. So this could have potentially been the title of my book, my dad's biography, because that's a slogan which I had noted all through my growing up days, right? I mean, he used to produce stickers which would say that. It was funny. I mean, the bedside wooden area, the backrest, even that had that sticker there. It was apart from multiple do not react. And the reason why this is so special and I consider it so important enough is because the whole problems we have in life is because we react and not respond. And of course, I later learned, right? Respond, don't react, right? And that whole 3-letter word which says do not react is where, if I go to Daniel Kahneman, system 1, system 2, right? We don't allow system 2 to flourish. We always depend on system 1, assuming that we are right, assuming that our first instinct is right, of course. And of course, in many cases, I've communicated the other thing, right? Go by your instinct. I instinctively said yes, and I'm happy that I did that. But in a situation where the impact is on yourself, go with instinct. But if the situation is where something other person is getting impacted, think through and do not react. Hold on, take those 5 seconds of deep breaths before you respond and say what you want to, and you'll be amazed as to what your reaction would be different, right? So I don't know where the location of the billboard would be, but I'm sure it's something which anyone and everyone can read and relate to and maybe imbibe in their lives.
No, sure. Thank you for putting it out. I think it's a very powerful 3-letter words. It could mean so much in so different ways to so many different people. So I'm looking forward to the book.
Yeah.
And thank you for making that effort to write that book. That takes a lot of courage too.
Yes. Great. Thanks a lot, Dilip. Dilip, has been wonderful talking to you and continue the fantastic journey you're doing, bringing out silent heroes in our sports world, championing their causes and really proving that every bit of effort counts.
Thank you, Hetal, for being a cheerleader in so many ways. I hope this conversation we had possibly could be useful to someone, and I'm really looking forward to continue to follow the work what you're doing. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks a lot. You have a nice day.